Nice to see some familiar faces, some old friends, some new learners. I think we have a nice full class today. I will give people another minute or so to finish arriving. So do go ahead and pick up that slide deck from the chat. That way you have the slides available to you and you can click any links on the slides. And if you miss anything along the way, there are ample speaker notes in the slides as well. So most of the things that you'll hear me say today are in the speaker notes. So if you have to walk away or you're multitasking, the things that I'll be saying today are in the speaker notes of today's slides. All right, it's 1:02, so let's go ahead and dive on in. So thanks again for joining us. Welcome to our first session today. I'll begin by briefly introducing myself and also introducing Arcus for those of you who are not familiar with Arcus. My name is Joy Payton. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be leading this 5-session webinar series. And Arcus is an initiative by the Research Institute of CHOP aimed at promoting data discovery and reuse and increasing research reproducibility throughout the research data lifecycle. And you can see that research data lifecycle in the round graphic on the right. And so changing the paradigm of research and how we conduct research, that's a big undertaking, and it requires a really broad approach. So at Arcus, we aim to improve data reuse and research reproducibility in a number of ways. So we use technology. So we have things like Arcus Labs and applied data science teams. We use library science, data archiving and cataloging, and also data education. So you can find out a lot more. There's a couple of links there. One is the Arcus application website. Please note there are some prerequisites to using the app, such as you need human subject protections, training completed, and you have to sign our terms of use. And I've got a little screenshot there below of what the app looks like. But you can, without any prerequisites or signing terms of use, also check out our Arcus SharePoint site. And that has a calendar of events and lots more information about Arcus. And so a little bit more about me and my team. I represent Arcus Education. So our role is to support CHOP scientists by helping researchers work in Arcus and acquire data science skills. And that's why we have skill series like the one you're in today. And so we do lots of different kinds of education. We've been around since 2017, and we do things like work one-on-one with researchers in office hours. We write how-to guides to help people use Arcus tools. We create asynchronous modules that people can use to learn data science skills in their own time. And we do synchronous events like this one. And sometimes we really focus on people who are working within Arcus, so researchers who are using the Arcus paradigm. And sometimes we broaden our reach, like we're doing today, to anyone at CHOP who wants to grow in sort of data analytics, data science skills, because we know that helping everyone acquire these skills is going to improve the conduct of science at CHOP and just help us build a data-driven workforce. So feel free to check out our page there. You can also email us if you have questions or you want to use some of our resources. So arcus-education@chop.edu is how you can get in touch with us. So one of the things that we do in my team is the skill series. That's what you're in today. And in this series, we are going to take 5 sessions to help you make your first steps in R and RStudio. So if you have never coded before in R or used RStudio software, you're in the right place. This is a great workshop series for you. And after you finish these 5 sessions, you'll have some experience using R in the context of RStudio, and you'll have done some hands-on work doing things like ingesting data, making data visualizations, and subsetting specific parts of the data that you want to study more closely. So let's get started with our first session. In this session, we're going to really quickly just review the basics about what R and RStudio are, along with some basics about literate statistical programming, Quarto, and Posit.cloud. And these topics were all the subject of a previous skill series that I know some of you are in. That skill series was titled Demystifying R and RStudio. So if today feels a little fast, you can always go back and review that material. There are recordings and slide decks for that skill series. And we'll also really quickly describe a little bit about Git. And our goals today are threefold. So by the end of the session, I want you to use source and visual mode in RStudio to work with Markdown. I want you to create a new code chunk in Quarto. And I want you to run a code chunk in a Quarto document. And don't worry if you don't know what any of that means, because we will get there together. So we will begin by distinguishing between R and RStudio. So the first logo you see on the left is for R. R is a statistical programming language, and it's really useful for doing data analysis. There are several features that make it attractive for people who work with data, and R was developed specifically for working with data analysis. So that's R. It is a language. It's a language with lots of benefits for doing data analysis. And then on the right, there's the logo for RStudio. And RStudio was the name of a company, as well as the name of some software that that company makes. And so a couple of years ago, that company changed its name from RStudio to Posit. But they kept the original name RStudio on at least some of their software. So you can think of the software RStudio as kind of a text editor, a fancy text editor for writing code. And the term for a fancy text editor for writing code is Integrated Development Environment, or IDE. And one of the things that you can do in RStudio really well is write code in a particular paradigm, a particular style called literate statistical programming. And that's what we're going to talk about next. So literate statistical programming is computer code, that's what makes it programming, that analyzes data, that's what makes it statistical, and it does so interlaced with detailed human language that describes what's happening in the code. And that's what makes it literate. And this is an example. So this is a snippet of a script that my team wrote. This is code that we actually use. And you can see that it has some description of what the code is doing. And that description is intended to help humans. So we put things like a header, a paragraph, a bulleted list, things that are intended to make things readable and attractive for the human eye to read. And then we also wrote the code, which is intended for the computer. So we're composing text for humans and we're composing text for the computer. And this is what literate statistical programming looks like. And working in R and RStudio is a really great way to get started working using this paradigm. And this type of document, by the way, is called a Quarto document. It includes the R language, that's what you see in those sort of gray boxes, but it also includes text that has special formatting called Markdown. And you may have also heard the term previously R Markdown. And R Markdown is practically the same thing as Quarto. It's an older term that predates or precedes the term Quarto. But if you've heard of R Markdown, Quarto is essentially the same thing. It's kind of a rebranding of the same kind of technology. So I want you to get started creating Quarto documents right away. So let's transition to getting you hands-on. When we teach R and RStudio, it can be very tricky for us, next to impossible, actually, to deal with everyone's different kinds of installation issues when they're trying to get set up, ask IS or Research IS or DTS to install software. Some people have admin rights, some people do not. And so we ask people when we're teaching R and RStudio to use Posit.cloud. So Posit.cloud is an online cloud-based service provided by Posit. That's the company that makes this software. It's very reliable. It has a very generous free tier. And it means that as teachers, we can really concentrate on our learners acquiring skills and not being bogged down and trying to figure out why you can't install it and what directory your stuff is installed in and all that kind of stuff. We cannot do it in a webinar this size with one instructor. So even if you do have R and RStudio installed on your computer, I'm going to ask you to use Posit.cloud for this webinar series. Because we simply don't have time to sort of untangle installing the exercise files and dealing with the particularities of everyone's install. But I do want to make one thing very clear, which is that Posit.cloud is not an appropriate place for doing your CHOP work, for working with healthcare data, with data from the enterprise, related to anything that you do at work, right? We work with regulated data. And Posit.cloud is not a safe or secure place to work with data related to your job. So if you are going to use R for CHOP data, you need to get R installed on your CHOP device or work in a secure installation on either the HPC if you work in research or a VDI. You need to work in a secure CHOP device. So there are some slides from demystifying R and RStudio that can help you understand how you can get R and RStudio installed on your CHOP device for when it's time for you to transfer your skills to actually working on CHOP data. But for now, what I want you to do is we're going to take 2 minutes. I want you to go to Posit.cloud. Some of you may already have an account. If you do, please log in. If you don't, please go to Posit.cloud, sign up for your cloud free, not basic, below basic is cloud free, sign up for cloud free and create that account. So I'll give you 2 minutes for that, and I think that will be plenty of time. All right, so I think many of you, most of you have gotten into Posit.cloud. If you're having difficulties, just let us know in chat what's going on. And I see some other thumbs up sort of just in chat generally. So I think we're okay to go forward. All right. So Git and GitHub Desktop are very complex and very useful software. And we could do a skill series, or in fact, several skill series just on these. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that in the next couple of slides, you are going to install the exercise files for this workshop from a Git repository. We're not going to talk in depth at all about Git and GitHub, but I want you to just have some familiarity with these terms. So version control software allows you to record changes, especially for files that are mostly text-based files. And it allows you to record what changed in the files, when it was made, who changed it, and they can record a message describing why the sets of changes were made. And so this is really useful for sets of files, like exercise files, that can change over time, where you make updates or you make improvements or you add material. And so my team uses these a lot. And so our exercise files for this workshop are stored in GitHub, in a Git repository. So we're not going to go into the details of how to use these software packages, but they are very useful. And I want to plant the seed now that if these software cross your path, these can be challenging to learn, but they are so very useful and can really improve working, especially in teams, where you are part of a team where multiple people are working together on a set of files. So just think about Git and GitHub as possibilities for your future. So what we're going to do now is start a new project in Posit.cloud. And this is the work that is going to lay the foundation for everything else that you're going to do within the 5 sessions of this workshop series. So this is a really important step to follow and complete. So when you log in to Posit.cloud, you're going to see a new project button. It should be sort of in the upper right. It's dark blue. And that new project button is nice and visible when you use Posit.cloud. If you're accustomed to using RStudio on your desktop computer, the new project functionality is a little bit more hidden. You can see, you'll see that it's a little bit harder to see on your desktop. But the nice thing is on Posit.cloud, it's very, very visible. So what you're going to do is you're going to click the down arrow on the new project button, and you'll have a few options. So one of those options is new project from Git repository. And what that means is you're going to copy some files from an existing location out in the internet that my team uses to store the exercise files. And that location is called a repository. So in the future, if we make changes to that repository, you can update your copy as well in your Posit project. So it's going to ask you for the URL of the repository, and that's where you will put the URL that is shown on your screen. And so we will copy and paste that URL so that you have it. And later on, you can try these other kinds of projects. I'll let you do that on your own time. But for now, I want to give you a couple of minutes to do these steps. So please do that now. I will start the timer. And I want you to do these 4 bullet points that are shown on this slide. Some great questions in chat about enterprise GitHub. So CHOP has its own internal GitHub website that is only for CHOP. And then github.com, which is sort of worldwide global GitHub. Some great conversation about that. Thank you for that conversation. I'm going to, I see 26 people have thumbsed up the comment showing that they have created their own project. Oh, 27. I want to get to 30. Excellent. All right, 30. I'm gonna count that as ready to move on. All right. So you now have a project in Posit. So let me, for those of you who may be having some issues, I just want to demo this for you. I'm going to copy this link, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in my Posit. So I've already logged into Posit. I'm going to click on New Project from Git repository, and I'm just going to paste in this URL and click OK. And it'll think for a couple of minutes, and then it'll create a new project. And that new project will include some files for me that it has taken from this repo or repository where I have populated it with some exercise files. All right. So once that finishes creating, we can take a look around at our panes. So RStudio, this is the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment. And this will look very much like the same RStudio desktop that you can get installed on your CHOP device. And you can see that I have a pane here on the left, and I have 2 panes here on the right. And on my lower right, I have a file browser. And that shows the files included in this project. So it looks like we have a data directory. We have an exercises directory. There's a solutions directory. And there's a few other files that may seem familiar to you. You may have seen a README before. And then there's a couple of other special files. And so on the left, we can see this is the R console. This is where R code actually gets run, and we can see the version of R that we're running. The upper right has some information about our R environment. The environment right now is empty. We haven't done anything yet, so there's not really anything happening there. So that isn't particularly interesting just yet. There is a really useful menu across the top, File, Edit, similar to other applications that you have. And I want to draw your attention here to Help. So if you click on the Help menu item, there's this great option called Cheat Sheets. If you're familiar with the term cheat sheet, a cheat sheet is generally a one-page piece of paper where you put a lot of information about a topic. And so this has a number of cheat sheets related to popular topics within R and RStudio. For example, there's the RStudio IDE cheat sheet. How do I work in RStudio? I'm going to click on this, and it will probably just download it directly to my Yep, it just downloaded it directly to my downloads folder. But if I click on that, it's a PDF, and you can see that this is a cheat sheet, and it gives me lots and lots of information about the actual IDE. So there's a number of useful cheat sheets there. So that is Help, Cheat Sheets. Now something interesting happened. Because I clicked in Help, something happened in the lower right. The file browser disappeared because the Help tab got activated. And because the Help tab got selected, the File tab got deselected. So if I want to show my files again, I simply have to move my mouse back over to the Files tab selector and reselect it. All right. So that's it for cloning our project. We have cloned the files. So now you have your own copy of the exercise files, and you're ready to start working on them. So let's go back to the slide deck. All right. So the best way to get started is just to jump in. So that's what we're going to do step by step. So this is what we're going to do. I am going to break this down step by step. So don't worry if these bullet points seem vague. We are going to create a new Quarto document, and we're going to start right away using a literate style. So we're going to describe what we're doing, then we're going to do the thing, we're going to make sure that our code works, and then we're going to save our file. So I'll give you just like a few seconds just to look over this set of bullet points, and then I'll take you to our first step. All right, let's do our first step together. And so what we're going to do with each of these steps, I'll give you about a minute, a couple of these steps less. I'll give you about a minute to do it, and then I'll demo it. All right, so first, what you're going to do is use File, New File, Menu option to create a new Quarto document. And you'll be asked to provide a title for that document. And please add Setup as the title. You can add your name as author if you want, but don't change anything else. Leave everything else as is and click Create. Then when your new file creates, don't click anything else. Even if you see a yellow banner come across offering you some options, don't take up that yellow banner's offer. Just don't click on it, and we'll explain why when we get there together. And also, you're going to see 2 buttons, Source and Visual. You might have to look around a little bit and find those. And try both Source and Visual buttons. Just kind of go back and forth and take a look at that. So I'll give you a minute to do that, and then I'll demo. Okay, so let me switch my screen over to my Posit.cloud, and I will show you what it looks like for me to do this. So I'm going to go to File, New File, Quarto document. It asks me to give a title. I'll say Setup, and I'm just going to click Create. All right, so that was pretty simple. Now, I want to point out that there is a yellow banner offering you a shortcut, and I do not want you to take this shortcut. If you did, it's okay, but I do want to show you how to manually install packages. This is a useful message, however, because what RStudio is telling you is, hey, for me to be fully effective, I need to install a package. You need R Markdown, but it is not installed. Do you want me to install it? And the answer is no, I don't want you to install it. I want to install it because it's important for you as learners to understand how to install packages. So we're going to use this information about we need R Markdown installed. We're going to use that information in just a moment. So there's 2 buttons here, Source and Visual, that I can click back and forth on. And the reason why it can be useful to click back and forth on these buttons is that I've talked about how you can have text that uses special marks called Markdown to create rendered HTML or rendered text that has bold or headers or bulleted lists and things like that. And Source and Visual allows you to go back and forth and see how Markdown becomes rendered to the final text and how that looks. All right, so for example, I'm currently in visual mode. The visual button is pushed down here, and I can see that Quarto here looks like a header. And here I have an HTML link here. I can see it's blue and it's underlined, the universal sort of sign for a link. And I have another header here that says running code. And then I have a word here, render, that's in bold. So let me click on source and see what that looks like. Here, Quarto is not, it's not bigger like a header, but it does have 2 hash marks. And here, Quarto.org has triangle brackets on either side. I bet that's what makes it a link. And here we have another header with 2 hash marks in front of it. And render, which I know becomes bold, has 2 asterisks on either side. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit more in my source and see if there's any other markdown that looks interesting. Well, what's this? Echo : false. That has 2 backticks on either side. So I wonder what that's going to look like in visual mode. It looks like it makes it monospaced. It makes it look like computer code. Now, if you go back and forth between source and visual, you might get a pop-up that says, hey, you're going into visual mode, and it has some information. about visual mode. It's not going to happen for me because I've been in my Posit.cloud account and seen that box before, but you might see that box and that's fine. All right, so that was step one. Now, does it matter which you use, source or visual? For this course, I am generally going to have you work in source so that we're all looking at the same thing, and also because I want to teach you Markdown, because learning Markdown is really useful, not just for R, but for lots of other tech that you might work in the future. So learning how to use these marks is very useful. But really, it doesn't matter. You can go back and forth. You can try both. You can work for a little while in source and then check and see how it looks in visual. You can try either and see what you like the best. All right. So let me go back to the slides. I'm just going to quickly open my chat window and see if there's any questions. If not, let's go on to step two. All right. So step two, add description. So what I'd like for you to do is delete all the stuff that was put in there as boilerplate text. So when you created this new document, RStudio was nice enough to offer you some sample code and sample text for you to learn from, right? And we call that boilerplate. You don't need that. So I want you to delete all of that. So depending on whether or not you put your name in as an author, that starts either in line 7 or line 8 if you're looking at source, where the Quarto header starts. So I want you to start there and just delete everything from that line on down. Just clear all of that out. And then what you'll do is you'll start by adding a new header, something like installing packages, and use 2 hash marks to indicate that it's a header level 2. Then enter a blank line and type a description, something like, we need to install packages. I'll let you do it, and then I'll do it. Okay, so let me go to my Posit.cloud. I'm going to go to source, and I'm just going to highlight everything from line 7 on down and hit backspace on my keyboard. I'm going to put 2 hash marks in that will make, if you're an HTML person, that will make an H2 header. If you know what that means, great. If you don't need to know. So I'll put installing packages, hit enter twice and say, we need to install some packages. All right. And I can see what it looks like by hitting visual. That looks pretty good. All right. Not too tricky. So let's go back to the slides and do the next step. So now we're going to add a code chunk. So a code chunk has a lot of symbols in it. It has 3 backticks and some squiggly braces and the letter R for the R language. And you can certainly type all of that. But it is much easier if you can find the Add a Code Chunk button, which is a green button with +C kind of at the top there. I have an orange arrow pointing to it on the screen. So what I'd like for you to do is position your cursor after your explanatory text. In my example, it's on line 11. Then use that Add a Chunk button to add a code chunk. And we're going to add an R language code chunk. And inside that code chunk, you're going to type exactly what is on your screen. And capitalization counts, and the quotes are important. So type exactly what you see on your screen. And you don't have to run that code cell. You don't have to execute it. Just type it and prepare it. You do it first, and then I will demo it for you. Okay, let me demo this. So I'm going to position my cursor on line 10. I like to have a blank line between my text and my code cell. I'm going to hit add a code chunk. Now in my case, it's going to automatically add an R language code chunk. Depending on your setup, for instance, on your RStudio on your desktop, it might say, what language code chunk did you want? Because your RStudio might be set up to use multiple languages. And you would say R, please, and it would give you an R language code chunk. In my case, it's already set up to use an R language code chunk. So let's look at the anatomy of this code chunk. It has 3 backticks. These are not the same thing as a single quote, a curly brace, the language, in this case R, and a closing curly brace, and then a blank line where we can put code, and then 3 more backticks to close the code chunk. So there's a space there to add code, and you can see that it's gray to kind of visually distinguish it. So now it's time for me to type in this code, and I'm going to start typing, and RStudio is going to try and guess what I want to type and use some predictive guesses and say, would you like insect sprays? No, thank you, but I would like install packages. So I'll use my down arrow and hit enter to say install packages. And it's kind enough to put my cursor right in between those 2 parentheses, which makes it easier. And I'm going to type the letter C. So C is for concatenation, which is a fancy word for list. I'm going to install 2 packages. So I want to pass a list of 2. In this case, it's actually concatenation, which is a kind of list. So I'm going to pass it inside this letter C. So I'm going to do an open parenthesis, and if you notice, my closed parenthesis comes along for free. As soon as I type that open parenthesis, the closed parenthesis just joins in. I'm going to do an open quote, and look at that, the closed quote comes along for free. And I'm going to carefully type R Markdown, all in lowercase. I have to move my cursor over with my arrow key and put a comma, and I'll put a space. I don't have to put a space. That is one thing in R that it's not picky about, is white space. I'll put another set of quotes and put tidyverse, because I know we're going to use a lot of the tidyverse functions and packages later on throughout the next few webinars in this series. So I should have install.packages, parens, and then a concatenation inside there that includes R Markdown, all lowercase in quotes, and tidyverse, all lowercase in quotes, and a comma between those. So take a look. Does yours look like mine? It should look like mine. All right, let's go back to the slides. Now we want to run the code chunk. All right, so again, first you'll do it and then I'll do it. So you're going to run this code by clicking on the execute or run code button, which looks like a little play button. It's a green triangle in the upper right corner of your code chunk. And those packages should install. Now it will take a while and you will get a very verbose output in your console. It will go and go and go. That's not a mistake, it's not an error. If you mistype something, you might get a shorter message that says, I don't understand, you made a mistake, there's an error. And if you get an error message, don't panic, see if you can figure out what it's trying to tell you. So go ahead and hit run on that. I'll give you just 30 seconds to find and hit that button, and then I'll join you. All right. Let me go and let's see if I typed this correctly. So live coding is always a fun exercise to find out, did I, the instructor, actually type this correctly? Let me hover over this button. It says run current chunk. Let me click on that. Excellent. So while it's running, let me explain that what's happening here is it's not only installing R Markdown and tidyverse, but it's also installing any packages that these two packages depend on. So you can see it's installing all these other packages that R Markdown and tidyverse need to have installed in order to be able to work. So that's called dependencies. So all of these dependencies are being installed. So I can tell it's still running because this has a red, hey, stop button, so I can click that to stop. This has a stop sign that I could click to make it stop. And here on line 12, there's a green progress bar that says everything's still going, everything is fine, we're in the green, we're still running. No problems so far, no errors so far, everything is hunky-dory. So it's running, running, running. And this is going to be very verbose because it takes a while because these are complex packages that have a lot of dependencies. Now, this can be a moment where folks maybe have run into some issues, maybe you mistyped something. So I do just want to take a moment and say, if you're having any issues, if you've run into anything along the way where you've kind of, gotten off track or you're confused, jump into chat and let us know how you're going. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for you to put your messages in chat, I will say we have completed. I can tell we're done because my line 12 sort of progress color bar has disappeared. My stop sign has disappeared in my console, and my prompt, my triangle prompt, has reappeared back in my console. So I could come down here to my console and I could actually enter a command here. So I'm done. Let's go back to the slides. And here is our final stage. I'm going to ask you to save this file. Now, you should not have to run this code again for this project because once you've installed these packages, you will not need to install them again within this project. If you start another project in Posit.cloud, you will need to install it in that project. But within this project, once you've installed these packages, you don't need to install them again. However, I want you to practice saving these files, and it might be handy to hang on to this. So what I'd like for you to do is use the File menu to save this file. And so I want you to give it the name Setup, and I want you to save it in Exercises. There's a couple of directories, so I want you to save it specifically inside the Exercises directory. So you do it, and then I will do it. Okie doke. So before I save anything, I want to point out to you that in my Posit.cloud, this is called Untitled 1, and my tab, the title of this document here is colored red, and it has an asterisk. And this indicates to me that there are unsaved changes. So I'm going to go into File, Save, and it says, well, where would you like to save this? You've never saved it as anything prior to this, so I would like to know where would you like to save it. I'm going to click into Exercises, and I'm just going to call it Setup. I do not have to add on a file extension. The file extension for this kind of file is QMD, but let's say I don't know that. I'm just going to call it Setup, and I'll click Save. And you can see that it added QMD for me. It is now not red, but black, and it does not have an asterisk. Now, what happens if I make a change? I'm going to make one small change. I change the exclamation point to a period, and now my the title of my script there, of my document, is again red and has an asterisk. And that's a little visual cue to me that there are some unsaved changes. So I can hit File Save, or I can use the file icon there, the disk icon. All right, so that is saving that. Now, if anything went a little bit wonky with your install, I will point out that there is a solutions folder here, and we do have a setup that we wrote that includes the setup. So if you if you're not sure that you did that right, there is a setup in the solutions that you can use. All right, so let me go back to the slides. So that's session 1. Today we did a lot. We talked about R and RStudio, Git and GitHub very briefly. We talked about literate statistical programming, and you did a lot of hands-on work. So you cloned the exercise files, you started a new project, you created a new document, you ran some code, you wrote some Markdown, and so good work. That was a lot today. And so the ARCIS education team, we really like to measure our effectiveness. And part of the way we do that is by measuring our effectiveness, and then we actually use our code to measure, how we're doing. So what I'm going to do is actually launch a poll. And what I would love for you to do, there's going to be 4 questions on this poll. So please do, you'll see there's a little pagination button. Please just kind of paginate through it and answer all of these questions, these poll questions. And when you've answered those questions, then I'd love to open it up for Q&A in the last 5 minutes. If folks had issues, had questions, feel free to drop a question into chat. But do answer those poll questions because it helps us understand if we are using your time wisely. All right, so let's briefly talk about what we're going to discuss next session. So in our next session, we're going to talk about projects. You created a new project today, but we'll talk a little bit about what makes projects so useful in RStudio, ingesting data and functions in R. So you'll get to work with some real clinical data that is hosted from the University of California, Irvine Machine Learning data repository. So next session is when things start to really get fun. So that's what's coming up next session. So with that, I don't have anything else for you. So you are free to go. If you want to stick around and ask any other questions, you're welcome to stay around. And we've got 2 more minutes just to answer folks' questions. But otherwise, I will see you next session. Thanks so much, everyone.